You want to test them at Aleph, 9a. Four lines on the top of the page. Hanhu Beitrei. There were these two people, Tafchi, two butchers. The Abdi and Yona Bahadi Hadadi. They made a deal with each other. To command the Ovid B'Yem the Chavri, Nikra'u L'Mashchei. Basically, they agreed. So that they were these butchers. Maybe they were probably shechtim as well. So they were able to do ritual slaughter, shchita, and they made a deal. Each one would work on the other day of the week. And if one of them would work on the wrong day, so then his friend would be able to tear the violator's skins. So the butcher would get to keep the skins of the animal, and if he violates the rule of working on the specific day he was supposed to, the non-violator would tear up the skins of the violator. There's a penalty. Okay, so one of them disregarded the law, he violated the agreement, and he worked on the day of his friend. So his friend went ahead, grabbed the skins and ripped them up. Also, Rava says he has to pay. So Rav Yemer says to Rava, what do you mean? We saw yesterday that a city has a right to create rules, including setting the rules of salaries and which days of the week you're allowed to work. So if they made such an agreement, why wouldn't it be binding? And therefore, the non-violator who tore up the violator's skins should be exempt from paying. So Rava did not respond to him. Rava did not respond. Rav Papa responded. Rava was correct by not responding. This is only true if the city is being run without an honorable person, who's running the city. But where such a person exists, so then they should consult with him to create the relationship. But they do not have their own authority to determine these factors. Meaning who could work on which day and what the penalty should be if they don't work. They should have given it to the mayor of the city, let's say, to make the decision. Because they didn't, therefore the non-violator is obligated to pay the violator for tearing his skins. As if there was no mayor of the city, so then the people of the city can make up the rules on their own. But once there's a mayor, an honorable person, then it's up to him. It's an interesting halacha. The rule is we don't make precise calculations with those that administer tzedakah, charity, and with those that administer hektish. That's the temple fund. With the gizborim are the trustees of the temple fund. Even though there's no clear verse that specifies this, there's an allusion to it. Now let's be clear, the verse here is referring to hektish, the temple fund. And the fact that this is the law in the temple fund, the Gemara presumes is also the case. It's a zecher, it's a sort of the concept is already expressed by hektish, and we apply it to tzedakah charity. They don't make calculations with the gizbarim, with the trustees. They work with trust. They don't make you don't make precise calculations. I know that transparency is a big democracy virtue. I don't obviously we all think it should be good, but clearly the Gemara does not think that is beneficial for the charity collectors and for the gizbarim, the trustees. Amar Belazar, af b'sheyesh la'adam gizbar nem b'tech b'yisai yotzer v'yimna. Belazar says even if a person has a assistant that gives out charity. Some of the very, very wealthy Jews, they hire these charity people. Guys whose entire job is to just distribute their charity. So while it's true that he shouldn't be exact with him with how much he distributes, but you should be exact with him about how much you give him. Yotzer v'yimnu, you should count how much is given to him. Shenemar v'yatzur v'yimnu, that the Jews counted the money that they gave to the trustees of hektish, of the temple fund. Amar Rav Huna says, "Boitkin lemezainis ve'ein boitkin leksus." Okay, so this is interesting. This is done today in some certain charities, in certain communities. If you want the local community charity, they have to check in. Like, are you really poor? Because sometimes people that could make it are they decide to rely on the public. So I know in a certain community, I was familiar with one of the guys who was the trustees of the charity. They used to look at they used to go for a family visit and used to check the fridge, see how full it was. They said, this is in Israel, they said it doesn't work for the Americans, because even if they're poor, their fridges are always full. But for the Israelis, apparently they had an empty fridge. Okay, so he says, Rav Huna says, to give food, you do investigation. But for clothing, you don't. Meaning, it's very logically, this makes a lot of sense, because clothing, like with the guy, I think the guy has like fancy suits stocked in his closet, but he's walking around, with torn shreds, half naked. The whole purpose of clothing is to be covered. If he's walking around with shreds, and he has no clothing at all, like Rashi says, he's naked, then clearly he doesn't have clothing. There's no reason to presume he's stockpiling it in some hidden place. The purpose of clothing is to wear it so you're not naked. So it could be that this is a verse. It could be it's logical. The logic is a guy walking around naked is embarrassed. So therefore, it stands to reason that you should trust him and give him, basic, covering. But a guy who doesn't have food, there's no readily apparent embarrassment. Another possibility is that it's a verse. The word porous means to investigate. So in other words, when you're giving a poor person bread, investigate him and then give him the bread. The continuation of the verse is when you see someone naked, the kisisa, you cover him. It doesn't say you investigate. Why? Because you don't need to investigate. You see a guy naked, you cover him. Kisira la'alter, immediately. You give him clothing. Rabbi Yehudah says the opposite. You do investigations for clothing, but not for mizainis, not for food. It may either be logic or a verse. The logic is the guy who's hungry is in pain. The guy who's naked is not, it might be embarrassed, but he's not in pain. Obviously, it depends on the climate, but presumably in a place the climate is such that it's sort of manageable. Another possibility is the verse. One second. The word porous here, so porous is spelled with a samach, but it's the Gemara says it could also be interpreted as a sin. So he says, well, porous as a samach means to give him prusa, to give him a piece immediately. So he says that porous with a sin means to investigate. Porous with a samach means to give him immediately. So he says, read it with a samach, meaning when you see a person that needs bread, immediately you give it to him. You say raw arm when you see a naked person, and you cover him. Kisera doesn't mean immediately give it to him. It means seeing with your investigation. The seeing here implies investigation, the opposite of what we said previously. Tiny Kab said Rabbi Yehudah, we have a Bryce that supports Yehudah's opinion. Amar Kisune, Baitkin Achrov. The guy says, cover me, we investigate. Parnasune, I need something to eat. Ain Baitkin, you do not investigate. Tan Hasan, we learned. Ain Perchson La'ani, however, you have a traveling ani, and he's hungry. The minimum you give him is Kikar Bipunyan Me'arba Sawan Besela. When a 4 sawan of wheat costs 1 sela, so you divide that up, you get a loaf of bread for 1 punyan. So it's in other words, this is a measurement of quantity. Okay, 1 second. Yeah. So Rashi says it's a loaf of bread of a quarter of a kav that costs 1 punyan. You give him bread. You give him bread. Lon, if he's sleeping for the night, nice and parnasaslina. So then you have to give him something to be able to sleep on. My parnasaslina. What does that mean? Amar Papa, Purya Beisadia. You give him a bed and a pillow. Shabbos, let's say staying the week. Nice and lemazon shalosh to this. You give him 3 meals for Shabbos. Tana, we learned im hayamaxer al hapsachem einis gakanlei. Once the guy is a schnorrer, he's going around asking for money. for day-to-day living expenses, then you're not obligated to support him. The logic here is that he'll manage on his own. Meaning, if you have somebody who's traveling through town to end up with his family who's destitute and he isn't schnorring, he's coming back from something or he's going somewhere, so then you give him, the community is obligated to support him. But once the guy is able to machzer al psachim, he's able to collect on his own, then he should collect on his own for his own needs. There was a pauper who was a schnorrer. He collected on his own, and he came to Rav Papa. Loy mizdakekle. Rav Papa would not help him out. Normally, if someone brayed of evil, Rav Papa imar loy mizdakekle in shachrina loy mizdakekle. If you don't help him, Rav Papa wasn't helping him because of this brisa. Once a guy is a schnorrer, he has to help himself. So if you don't help him, who's going to help him? Limus, do you want him to die? Vatanya, we learned in the brisa. So Rav Papa responded to him, Vatanya, Rav Papa says, what do you mean? It's a brisa. The brisa says once the guy is a schnorrer, then you don't help him anymore. He helps himself. So Amar Loi, so he said to him back, you don't help him for a big gift. Meaning, if the guy is a pauper, he's traveling through town, you can give him a larger gift. If you know he needs money, he's destitute. But if he's already a schnorrer, then you don't give him a larger gift. You give him only a smaller gift. He's not your obligation because he doesn't live in the town. And he knows how to take care of himself. He already knows how to schnorr, so you don't have to take it. It's not necessary for you to take care of him. But Rav Yemer, Rav Sama's argument to Rav Papa was that he should have at least given him a small gift. Amar Vasi says, Ravasi says a person should never forget to give at least the minimum obligation of charity, which is a third of a shekel for a year. Shenemar, as the verse states, "V'ha'amadnu aleinu mitzvahs, losses aleinu shlishus shekel b'shana, la'avodas beis Elokeinu." One second. The Hamadnu Aleinu mitzvahs means they accept it upon themselves as a commandment, as a mitzvah, losses aleinu shlishus shekel b'shana, to give at least a third of a shekel of charity per year. La'avodas beis Elokeinu, to serve in the house of God. V'amar Ravasi says, one second. Yeah, and the Gemara is presuming here that this does not refer to the temple, or refers to the house of God. Here refers to the mitzvah of tzedakah. V'amar Ravasi, shkul tzedakah keneged kol mitzvahs. Shenemar amadnu aleinu mitzvahs sifkan ela mitzvahs. Ravasi says that tzedakah is more important than all the mitzvahs of the Torah, because the word mitzvah is plural, meaning all the mitzvahs, is used to describe a singular mitzvah, the mitzvah of charity, of tzedakah. So therefore, we see that charity includes in it the plurality of all mitzvahs.
Question: how come you're saying a third of a shekel when we have a mitzvah of a shekel?
So the half shekel is to give to the temple. This refers to giving charity. Yeah. Okay. Omer Belozar, Godel ha'ma'asa yoser min ha'isa. This is a very interesting one. Somebody who pushes people to give tzedakah is more his service is more important than the one who actually gives tzedakah. We're talking about fundraising today and charity campaigns. It's a big incentive for a person to participate in the campaign. Godel ha'ma'asa, the one who pushes, ma'asa literally means to force. Yoser min ha'isa, more than the one who actually gives. Shenemar, as the verse states, v'haya ma'isa hatzedakah. Now, if we were talking about just charity, we wouldn't call it a ma'isa, an action. The word ma'isa tzedakah means actually ma'asa tzedakah, the one who forces people to give tzedakah, meaning the one who is the fundraiser. What does he get? Shalom, peace. Va'avodas hatzedakah, and for the service he gets hashket, serenity, ubetach, and security ad olam, forever. Zacha, if the charity goes to a good cause, he has given money to the poor, he's given them food. Okay. Aniyim merudim Meruda means like whaling. But what this refers to is, I believe, what they call in English the quartering. That's the is that what's called in the Constitution? The quartering, where you're not, the government can't seize assets without paying for them. Pushing soldiers into people's houses. So so in other words, loy zachav, if a person doesn't give enough charity, then he'll have to deal with the quartering. He'll have to pay he'll have to pay for hosting soldiers. Okay, and the terminology used for these soldiers is wailing poor people. It's aniyah merudim. Amar le Rava b'nei Mechuza. Rava says to the people of Mechuza, "Matusim minayich, I beg of you, aisu b'hadi hadadi ki hechid yilhev lechu shamba b'malchusa." Help each other so that you avoid having to quarter soldiers. But Amar Blazer says, "As much Beis Hamikdash kayam, adam shekel sheklei u'meskaperlei." When the Beis Hamikdash was standing, a person takes his machzah shekels, half shekel coin, and he gets an atonement with it. A person must give charity, and if he doesn't, then the non-Jews will come and confiscate that money anyway. And even so, even though the money is forcefully taken from him, it's considered to be charity. The noikshim, these are the tax collectors. Giving them money is also called a charity. Now, obviously, a person is not one does not have to give charity to the richest country in the history of humanity. But if one doesn't give charity and the money is forcibly taken from him because of that, then that money is considered to be his charity. We'll soon see a very interesting Gemara. Hopefully, we'll get to it today. We'll see it. It's really on Yudam and Aleph. It's really tomorrow's daf with somebody who We'll see the story. Basically, they didn't give enough charity, so the king came and confiscated the rest of the money.
How does the king know how much charity?
We'll talk about it. We'll get to it tomorrow. I'm not telling you the full story. Okay. Amar Rava. Rava says, "Hi Milsa, ishtoyli ulo mishagesh or chayse deime." This story was said to me by Ulo, who debased the ways of his mother. He had his mother do something which was inappropriate. We'll see the story. Okay, but let's see what he said first. Okay, who was, by the way, this young infant who debased his mother? It was Rav Sheshes. We'll get to the story in a moment. But first, what did Rav Sheshes say? Mishmeder of Elazar, the name of Rav Elazar. This is the verse states. The Yilbish Tzedakah, he donned charity, Kesirian, like a coat of mail. Coat of mail, obviously, is what what they call them, the knights used to wear when they would joust. They would fight on horseback. They'd wear a coat of mail. Okay, I'm sorry, this is more like not a plate of an armor plate, like more like the knights instead of the plate of mail, which is a bunch of strings. So the armor plate, you need a bunch of plates to be able to put together a uniform. So every plate contributes to the plated armor, the Syrian to the coat of arms. So after called Pruta this is often what you hear charity collectors say. They say every quarter counts. Right, because every quarter is another plate on the coat of arms. Rav Chanina says, "Mehacha from here, ukebeged idim koltzet gesenu." Okay, so this verse actually is a verse of negativity. It's a verse of rebuke. That God will take the charity and I'll turn it into a stained garment. This is when the Jewish people disobey the word of God. But that's beside the point. The main point here is that the charity is considered to be a garment. What's the key feature of that? Every thread is a contributing factor of the garment. So every coin contributes to the large quantity of money that's necessary. Now we get to the question. Okay, why is he called the infant that debased the ways of his mother? Rabbi Chadvi and Rav Sheshes got into a tango, and the result of that was not very pleasant. It was a little inappropriate. Okay, what was the question? Okay, a little bit of a sidetrack here. I'm not going to go into this too much. We have Mitzvah, right? Mitzvah is a spiritual affliction that looks something like what we call today leprosy. Okay, there are 3 phases in the Mitzvah. The main phases, really the first 2, which is Muskar and Muchlat. If under certain circumstances, the mitzvah is locked up for a week. And then, depending on whether there's white hairs or the blemish has grown, he potentially would be what we call mukhlat. Mukhlat means he's excommunicated from the city, he has to leave the city, and he has the full-fledged tumah. He's completely tumah. He's ava tumah, very severe type of tumah. The same level of tumah as any tumah hayetzim and aguf, that would be zav, anida, and yeledis. As a matter of fact, mitzvah is often put into that category, even though technically speaking, it's not an emission from the body. Now, a mitzvah mukhlat, severe level of tumah, it takes 7 days for him to become pure to be able to eat truma again. So he has a severe level of tumah. He does a certain purification process with birds. They dip it in the blood and the water. And then for 7 days he can't eat truma, and then afterwards they do another process, and then he can eat truma. And in order to go into the temple, he has to do a third process at a later point, really the next day, the 8th day. Okay, so these periods are called muskar. Muskar is a very minor level of tumah. Let's say he's locked up for a week, and then the nega shrinks, becomes smaller. So what happens? He goes to the mikvah and he's tar by evening. Again, so you have muskar, mukhlat, the severe level of tumah, and then you have someone who's counting the 7 days. He's a sefer. He's counting. How do we know that if you touch a mitzvah during those 7 days, he makes tumah, he can make a person tameh? Since he makes clothing tameh, so he could also make a person tameh. Mitame adam. So this is Rav Sheshes' response. So Rav Chadvi says back to Rav Sheshes, Amalei dilma tumah b'chiburim shiny. Okay, the tumah of clothing is very unique. Now, there's 2 ways for clothing to become tameh. One is that you have a pile of towels or shirts. In that case, the shirts are not being worn. There's just a pile of shirts. They have the same status of tumah as a person or as any other vessel. There's nothing unique to the clothing. However, if you're wearing the clothing, that's a different category. So it's possible for you to pass tumah directly to your clothing. Now, let's explain. Let's say you have a tumah that's an avatumah. It's called a sharatz. Let's say you have a certain type of bug or a rodent, one of the 8 types of rodents, and you touch the rodent. Okay. And then you touch that. So now the rodent is an avatumah. You become a rishon tumah, first degree tumah. Okay. And let's say you touch a pile of towels. The pile of towels is not tamei at all, because kalim vessels are not susceptible to beyond a rishon tumah. So you're already a rishon. You can't degrade the tumah once. If you touch the loaf of bread, you can make the loaf of bread tamei, because food could become a shaining, but you cannot make clothing tamei. However, there's a unique feature that if the clothing is being worn by you, so then you become a rishon, and the clothing also becomes a rishon. So it's like the same step. It's called connected tumah. You see the tumah is connected as if the clothing touched the rodent. Even if the clothing didn't touch the rodent, I touched the rodent and I was wearing the clothing. So he said to him, maybe the reason why Mitzvah can make his clothing tamei is not because, in other words, a Mitzvah can make a person a rishon because he can make clothing into a rishon. Well, no, maybe the clothing he's wearing becomes a rishon, because that's tumah b'chiburin. It's connected. In other words, it's connected to him because I'm wearing it. But maybe to make somebody else tamei, the Mitzvah would not be able to make somebody else tamei, just like he wouldn't be able to make clothing that was on a pile tamei as well. Only the clothing that he's wearing would be problematic. So Amalei says, okay, so he's to shiny. Why? The hahisit nevelo. Let's say a guy carries heset is the act of moving tumah, not necessarily touching it. So let's say he has a sled with a dead animal, kosher animal that was dead, it wasn't slaughtered correctly. So it has tumas nevela. I don't know I'm not sure if a chai has, I think a chai does have tumas nevela. And he pulls it. So the clothing he's wearing becomes tamei. By the way, if he touched a piece of clothing, it would not become tamei, because of this idea of tumah b'chiburim. You're wearing the clothing has direct connection to what you're doing, the tumah that you now touched, even though it didn't actually touch it. Whereas clothing that you're not wearing would not be susceptible to become tamei by you. So he says, so he says, okay, well, sheretz, a rodent, how do we know the rodent makes a person tamei? Because we know the rodent makes clothing tamei. Now, there's a little bit of a catch here. If a rodent makes clothing tame, the rodent can't wear clothing, right? Obviously, a rodent making clothing tame is a direct tumah. It's like a rodent touching a person. It's the same thing because the rodent can't wear the clothing.
Right.
So obviously, we're not talking about. So Rashi says that would have been a good counter argument, but he had a better counter argument. It says specifically, it's a verse. The verse says that a person who touches a sheretz, touches a certain type of the 8 rodents or 8 bugs. By the way, they're a mix of bugs and rodents. They're called Shmeina Shratzim, the 8 categories of creatures. Okay. It says, the verse says you touch one of these 8 creatures, you become tamei. Somewhere says you're right. So Rav Sheshes tried again. How do we know that a person who touches semen becomes tamei? Somewhere says lav mishum because it makes clothing tamei. The rabbis esanegea. Meaning that a person, ish includes a person, not just a person who has a seminal emission, but a person who touches semen also becomes tamei. Okay, so basically, Rav Sheshes did not have an answer. And Rav Sheshes seems to have stumbled on obvious refutations. It did not look good for Rav Sheshes, as you might imagine. Rav Sheshes was kept on being debunked, and what seems to be pretty obvious, things that he should have known.
Mhm.
So Rav Achadi cracked a joke at Rav Sheshes' expense. Rav Sheshes was deeply insulted by that joke. Rav Sheshes. Ishtik Rav Achadi, because Rav Sheshes was so insulted, Rav Achadi became mute. He couldn't speak anymore. He lost his ability to speak. This Yakar Talmudei, and he forgot all of his Torah study. Okay, now the mother of Rav Sheshes was very disappointed by this. I'm not 100% sure why. Let me see if they have a footnote explaining why Rav Sheshes' mother was concerned. Maybe it was the same mother. Okay. Our scroll is not exactly sure either why. Her motive is not clear. But whatever it is, perhaps because she wanted Rav Sheshes to forgive him. Regardless, the mother of Rav Sheshes comes to Rav Sheshes. And she started crying in front of him. She started yelling at him and screaming at him that he should forgive Rav Achadve, and he wouldn't listen to her. So Amrlei, so this is the inappropriate thing that why Rav Sheshes was called the infant that debased his mother. Because his mother, it was necessary for his mother to make a slightly inappropriate comment. Amrlei chazi lahani chadi demotzis minayu. Look at my breasts that you suckled from, and because of that, boy rachmi alav itzi, Rav Sheshes agreed that for the compassion of his mother, he would pray to God and request healing for Rav Achadvi. Ve'itzi, and Rav Achadvi was healed, and he got back his Torah learning and his ability to speak. Okay, now what's the answer to the question, by the way? What is the source that a Mitzvah makes a who's counting 7 days makes a person tamei? It says that at the conclusion of chaluta, that's the excommunicating of the Mitzvah, he has to wash his clothing. It says at the conclusion of the counting of the 7 days to each Rumah, he also washes his clothing. Just like in the first case, in the first scenario, it's necessary to wash his clothing because he has the ability to make a person tamei. So too, in the second washing, he also has the ability to make a person tamei, albeit at a lower level, only as a rishon tumah. Amr B'Lozer, someone who performs charity in secret is greater than Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu writes that he was afraid of the destructive angels known as af, anger, and chema, another word for anger. If anyone's come to either the shir that I gave before Pesach on the letter of Rav Shamshin, or have come to the shir on eating kosher foods, we've discussed these 4 levels of destructive angels at length. They're mashkas af, they're what is it? Oven, mashkas, af, and chema. Oven and mashkas Moshe Rabbeinu was able to deal with. Af and chema he was not able to deal with. By the way, that's why before Marav we say V'hu Racham. We mention these four destructive angels, right? Yechaper Ovain, V'layashchis, V'hir B'lashiv Apa is Af, V'layar Kol Chamasa, that's Chema. Okay, anyway.
We're also talking about up in, I don't know if it's Geshem or.
Yeah, absolutely. So Af is one of these four destructive angels. So Moshe Rabbeinu could not handle the angels of Af and Chema. The Ilu B'Ois Tzedakah, but those that perform Tzedakah, Ksiv Matan B'Seiser Yechaper Af, someone who gives charity in secret, he will be able to control the destructive angel known as Af, anger. What he says, bribery in one's pocket results in a tremendous anger. Now, the first opinion holds that a gift in secret to the poor, so it doesn't embarrass the poor person, he doesn't know who's giving him the gift. That gift also takes care of Chema, takes care of Af and Chema. If you have bribery, that results in fiery Chema, destructive Chema. But if you give a Matan B'Seiser, you'll deal with Af and Chema. However, the next opinion says, no. You're only giving a gift to the poor in private is only it only covers Af. It does not deal with Chema. Chema is a separate thing. It says Af kaifa, Chema ain't kaifa. It only controls the destructive angel called Af and not the destructive angel of Chema. Meaning, the shaychet here is not illicit bribery; it's legitimate bribery. How do you bribe God? You give charity, right? It's a Gemara by the way in Brachas. The Gemara calls charity you want to bribe God, you give charity. It's the only way to bribe God. So in other words, and even though you bribe God by giving charity, you still have Chema Aza. You still won't be able to control Chema. Chema remains uncontrollable. Some say Rav Yitzchak has another interpretation. Kol dayan shenoit l'shaychan maybe Chema Aza l'olam, referring to illegitimate bribery, meaning a judge who collects bribery brings tremendous destructive force of Chema. Shenemar v'shaychet b'chek Chema Aza. V'amar Yitzchak kol anoisim prutul ani misbarach b'sheish brachas v'mefayis b'dvarim misbarach b'yud aleph brachas. Someone who gives charity to the poor gets 6 blessings. Somebody who comforts him with words gets 11 blessings. This is important to know. Sometimes you see people collecting charity, they don't really need the money as much as they need the emotional support. And if you want to think, you think the money is the bigger level, it's not. It's the 11 blessings are given for those that provide the emotional support. They listen. I remember I had a number of Rabbeim, teachers that they were all, none of them had any money. You know, they can give $1 to charity or something, but they'd always listen to the guy. The guy would tell them the whole story and they'd give him $5 or $1. Poor people, they couldn't afford to give anything more than that, but they'd listen to him. And one gets 11 blessings for this. Okay, it's interesting. Someone who gives a coin to an ani gets 6 blessings. As the verse states, okay, so the Gemara here doesn't actually quote the full 6 blessings. It quotes the actions. What are they? When one gives the poor bread, or he brings the poor into his house, or he sees the naked and he covers them. And the next 2 verses list the 6 blessings. So if you want to look it up, it's in Yeshaya. Let's see if they bring it down here. It's Ches and Tes in Yeshaya. They don't bring it down. 58, 8, and 9 lists the 6 blessings. They have it in the footnote there. Okay. Somebody who offers him, who has a compassionate. He talks to him. He helps him out. He comforts him. He blesses him. He gets blessed with 11 blessings. Shenemar batofek l'rov nafshecha v'nefesh nene tasbia. Meaning, this guy who's hungry, and you listen to him. You comfort him. You get 11 blessings. Some of them include the sun will cover the darkness. The dark will be like day. God will guide you constantly. God will comfort you. The destroyed will be rebuilt, and the foundations of the world will be restructured, will be reestablished. Okay, and there's 11 blessings in those few verses. You can look at them on your own. It's in the footnote there in the art scroll. Somebody who pursues, so this is an interesting one. somebody read it. Let's read this closely. Roidiv tzedakah, somebody who pursues charity. So that's the if, right? If you pursue charity, then what do you get? Okay, Yim Tzachayim, you find life. That makes sense. Okay, you also find charity, tzedakah. Well, what does that mean? If you pursue charity, you find charity. What exactly does that mean? Like charity is the if, not the result.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe charity that incenses was comforting or whatever.
Okay, we'll get to it. The covet and honor. So the Gemara says, "Mishum derayis tzedakah yim tzedakah," because you pursue charity, therefore you get charity. Eloi melacha. What does it mean? Called roidiv achar tzedakah. Somebody who pursues charity. Hakadosh Baruch Hu mamtzilei mois va'oisem en tzedakah. God will provide him the ability to continue to give charity. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar, Hakadosh Baruch Hu mamtzilei bnei adam hamehuganim loy latz lahem tzedakah k'dei lekabel lahem schari. 1 second. Okay, God. So the second explanation is that God finds fitting recipients of charity, right? Obviously, there is many different charitable needs amongst Jewish people. Obviously, we'll talk more about that tomorrow. If God loves the poor, right, then why did He make them?
So many, yeah.
So this is a serious question. We'll deal with this tomorrow. It's a question Tanis Rufus asked Rabbi Kiva.
Right out of the song.
Yeah, okay. So now there's a lot of different needs. Who gets the most eligible needs? Those that pursue charity, God arranges for them to get the most eligible candidates. They'll kabbalah schari to get the most reward. Meaning, it is possible for a person to give charity, and it all goes to the wrong causes. Like what Rabbah said. Rabbah, Dorish Rabbah, Ma'il Siv. Okay, this is the prayer of Jeremiah, of Yirmiyah. So Yirmiyah is not happy with the Jewish people. There's just one problem, that a lot of them are giving charity. So he prays to God and he says, V'yu muchshalom lefanecha be'esapecha aseh b'hem. 1 second. Okay, so he says to God that they're trying to kill me. Al techaper alavaynam, don't forgive their sins. Don't erase their sins, and they should stumble when you're angry with what they do. What does this mean? Amar Yirmiyah fnekash baruch hu Rebbeinu Shalom. Afilu b'shasha koifen es yitzrim mevakshim las tzedakah fnecha achshilim b'nei adam she'enim mugadim k'dei shleikabel leim sachar. Even when they're trying to give charity, make sure they get the least eligible candidates. Give them the what do you call it? The tricksters, the liars, the fakers, that they should not get any reward for their charity. Shouldn't accomplish anything meaningful. So in other words, so if somebody pursues charity, God makes sure he gets the most eligible candidates, not the least eligible ones. If somebody gives charity, he's familiar, he constantly is giving charity, so he merits children that are wise, wealthy, and bali agoda, people that have the they have a certain respect because they're able to draw the hearts and minds of people. So let's see. Bali chachma d'chsivim tzachayim, wisdom, because it says they'll find life, and life is a code word for wisdom. Bali oisher, wealth, d'chsiv tzedakah. Tzedakah, charity here means wealth. Bali agoda d'chsiv koven, honor. And the reason, and honor is associated with the ability to inspire hearts and minds. The honor of the wise they will inherit. Tanya, Hayrameir Omer. Okay, yeah, let's start it because I just mentioned it before. We'll have to continue this tomorrow. Tanya, Hayrameir Omer. Hayrameir said, Yesh le bal din lahashivcha. You have a guy who argues, he can argue to you as follows. If God loves the poor, why doesn't he give them something to eat? It's a merit for those that are not poor, that they should be saved from the tribulations at the end of their lives. It's the suffering that they would accrue because they sinned, commonly known as hell. Okay, and this is the question. This is the question that Tanis Rufus asked Rabbi Kiva, and we'll continue with this. We'll discuss the story tomorrow. Okay, great day.